Here I am at Heber J. Grant's and John Taylor's grave. These are both November prophets, both born on leap years like me. I'm not going to show everything here, but I want to show just a couple things. There's Heber's memorial, there's his grave. Here's my mom's, September 12th, with only one of the digits wrong. She was born in 1951. And then there's their marriage. My parents were sealed November 27th, 1973. That's just a month after my grandma. That part might be coincidence. And even the July 7th, 1942, it matches an ordination of Lee. Only the 4 is wrong. So 1 digit wrong on that, 1 digit wrong on the November 26th, 1 digit wrong on that. The November 26, 1973 is the strongest because it's literally 1 day from my parents' sealing. And it just is 3 down from his memorial. November prophet, born on a leap year like me. Notice how the Lord separated these 2 November prophets in the cemetery because they're right next to each other. They're not close to the others, but because they're both leap year prophets. I believe that's part of the reason. But I'm not going to show everything here. I just wanted to show that. And then I want to show the only 2 November 1980s in this entire vicinity. In fact, this is a super old area. John Taylor was in Carthage jail when Joseph was killed. Joseph and Hiram. I mean, look at that. You have the Farr family right there, the parents of Lauren and Aaron Farr. Aaron and Lauren lived with Joseph Smith when they were kids for a little while. That's their parents, I think, born in the late 1700s. But this is super old area. There's a few new ones, probably because they remained in the family for so long. They owned the spot. For example, look, Truman Madsen, 2009. I used to watch his videos a lot. Disciple of Jesus Christ, witness of Joseph Smith. He made a lot of great videos, but I'm going to show the only 2 November 1980s. In fact, that there's even 2 of them defies the odds in an area this old. J. Golden Kimball, Apostle Kimball is right there. But again, I am not going to show everything. So look at this. I'm going to show a pattern here. Here you have the week I was born. If you go diagonal, you get Heber's November 22nd. There is John Taylor, November 1st. There's his November 1st. And you also get Brigham's June 1st. Why is the week I was born here? And 2 of the 3 prophets where you can derive their birthday, they just happen to be these 2 prophets. Plus Brigham, who's not in the cemetery. And John Taylor's stronger because you're not going diagonal. Now, before I get to the other November 1980, I'm going to show the only John Joseph, first and middle name. The only John Joseph anywhere, even remotely close to prophets. And believe me, I know their areas, including extensively around them, going quite a distance. This is by far the close, and in fact, I mean, this name is so rare in this order. I've hardly ever seen it. I've seen Joseph John, but I've hardly ever seen this. Watch. Okay, so there's John Taylor. Isn't that interesting? John, and the fact that my grandfather is being represented here. But before I get there, let me show one other thing. For a Los Angeles temple to be in an area this old in Salt Lake is very, very rare. Usually you get this in newer areas, but look, and it just happens to be 3 days from Dallin H. Oak's birth. So that signifies this as at the very least defying the odds, and some type of prophetic messaging going on here. On the back, and there's Jedediah Grant, the mayor of Salt Lake, a first presidency member. He was Heber J. Grant's father. He's also born on a leap year. There's my mom's middle name, Lorenzo Fayette, New York, Fayette, and Faye. They come from the same name. I've already looked into that. On the back of the Los Angeles temple one of the children listed is an Aaron. Okay, let's go down here. Okay, here is the only John Joseph anywhere even close to any president of the church. And I've demonstrated a pattern here, how the Lord is using October 7th, 1914 in a way that by far defies the odds. That in the premortal, the Lord sent John Joseph Iacono into the world on October 7th, 1914 with other things in mind. Some of that was his posterity, which would be born into the church and play a major role in the last days and the 7 plagues and so forth. But look at that. He just happens to have a November president of the church's birth. Okay? Now, look at this. Let's see if there's things that defy the odds here, because this is not normal. I've walked cemeteries now. Elder Maxwell, the apostle that I link to me the most, other than maybe the November 7th apostles. And in fact, I had a more of a connection with Elder Maxwell, but he's not a November 7th. However, he was called from Holy Cross Hospital 8.5 months after my birth on July 21st, 1981. He was ordained an apostle in the Salt Lake Temple on July 23rd, 1981. 2 days after his call from Holy Cross, which is clearly the more important date. Nothing trumps these dates, ordination. So there's somebody coming. I'll try to be quiet and finish this video. So you have this just kitty corner from the John Joseph. Now, let's see if there's a pattern here that defies the odds. You have John again, and then you have the back of these. So we got to go to the other side here. But, okay, and then the back of these. Okay, so 2 down from the John Joseph. This is what you get. You get a September 1951, which is the month and year my mom was born, 4 days from her birth. However, it just happens to be a prophet's birthday, David O. McKay, with a Sharon, which represents a lady who gives birth to an Aaron. The next one has a November prophet's birth year. The next one has a Dorothy, which makes sense, and like the John Joseph. Okay, I'm not going to show everything because it's starting to rain here. Here you have a prophet's month and year. Again, the patterns continue to defy the odds. A November prophet, November 4th, 1907. That's 10 days before Howard W. Hunter. Because of the rain, I can't see these very good, but here you have an August 12th, which is a prophet's, and then here you have, oh, it's 2 down. Then here you have stronger than an August 12th, because it's Oaks 12, 1932. However, because it's a July, you're now intertwining my July 2nd patriarchal blessing in with the 12, 1932. Okay, that part could be coincidence. Nevertheless, the data in this row so far is pretty strong. And by the way, there's a bunch of Spencers right there across from the, oh, look at the deer. Perfect timing. There's a bunch of Spencers, Orson Spencer, last name. These are pioneers. Obviously, I know that name. Right across from the September 8th. And to be clear, there's no other September 1951 anywhere down there, anywhere up there. There's one, it's almost by that thing right there, which is caged in, the one that's caged in, it's almost over there. There just happens to be an Aaron symbol, which is the son of this guy right here. Let's see here. Yeah, right there, that's Aaron Farr. Let's see, Michelle Farr here. All right, and then, so watch this here. So as you keep going down the same row, see a lady's walking here, and so that's why I'm being quiet. As you keep going down the same row from the John Joseph, and I promise 100% there's only 2 November 1980s anywhere. There's not even one in the next plot. There's not even one in that plot across that street. It's just the one up there, which for some reason has these 2 prophets' birth symbols, which further defies the odds, and it's fitting. It's fitting. Now, keep in mind that we just passed Hunter's month and year. Super, super strong, far, far stronger than his birthday. As you keep going down the John Joseph, look, you get to an October 9th. This one, I don't know. It's been knocked over, so I don't know what it is. However, watch this. In basically the same row, you have one that is irregular, kind of like that one. Maybe it was buried on top of parents or grandparents, but whatever. So you have one right next to the October 9th. This is the John Joseph. There's the November prophets, leap years, just like me. 2 November prophets. That's Heber J. Grant became the 7th president of the church in a November, on November 23rd, 1918. Now watch this pattern. There is President Hunter's November 14th. So now fill in the blank. You had the November 4th, 1907 right up there. Now here's Hunter's November 14th, the prophet's birthday, 7 days after I was born, and a month and a half from President Kimball's birth. Watch. Let's see if there's any more confirmations. And I'm not going to show everything. I just want to try to keep it short and simple as possible. As you go this way, from that, you go through this, which is 8, 9 days from my wife's birthday, who I believe was foreordained. I have no doubt about that. Holy Cross symbol, 1882. Okay, that could be coincidence, but let's just keep going. Watch what it hits next. It basically hits this. It is the next 1980, which is not in November. And by the way, this is super, this area is old. I mean, look, Bullock, 1835, 1817. I think he was assistant to Brigham Young. Something like that. Like, this is the Winslow with the Aaron. They were born in the late 1700s. Aaron stayed with the prophet Joseph Smith. That's not coincidence. The Aaron's right there next to the John Joseph and all that. That's the only Aaron symbol anywhere close to the prophets, except there's 2, kind of one by the tree. He's listed as a child, and then another one down there. Those are not coincidence either. Now let me demonstrate this next to the 1980, because that formed a line. Watch. 8 days from November 7th Apostle. 1873, this was either like a day or 2 from David O. McKay's birth. George Albert Smith, that was about 2 or 3 or 4 days from George Albert Smith's birth. This is highly, 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 highly unusual. We're not talking 2 weeks, then the other one's 2 months. This sequence right here, for some reason, on my 1980 with my July 2nd, and with the November 7th Apostle, which is what he's saying, and it's super close to his birth, is highly, highly unusual, and it forms the line. Now watch this. Look what is just across from that. The most important dates are ordinations. Watch. by far. These are the most important dates. They trump American Revolution. They trump everything. You're talking about the keys. You're talking about the restoration. You're talking about the office of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Joseph Fielding Smith was ordained January 23rd, 1970. So this isn't just an important date, that one of the most important dates, which is ordination dates, but the fact that there's such perfection here. And then there's Claudia's April 4th, which is also a prophet's birthday, coming from, look, like 9 days from her birth. Okay, let's see if there's one more pattern as you follow the line that defies the odds. Would you not expect my mom's symbol in relation to my birth? My mom's, September 12th, on a November prophet's birth year. Uchtdorf. November 6, 1940, it says. As you go through that, for example, to September 12th, it goes through the ordination, and then it basically hits the corner of this. I'm not going to obsess over every little thing here, but this is just way, way, way too strong. I'm going to end the video, but there's one thing I forgot. These are pioneers. These are people that knew Joseph. I didn't point that out, but you have a November 80 pattern. There's the Dorothy. There's the Paul. There's the Sharon, September 8th, 1951. There's none other. There's none other September 1951. The other one's by that cage. There's none other anywhere. There's that. The John Joseph has the November prophet. You have the ordination of Maxwell, who was called eight and a half months after my birth from Holy Cross. And he died the month and year I got my blessing, my patriarchal blessing, which talks about the line of the prophets. He died on July 21st. I forgot to show one more. And there's a lot actually up here. But I honestly wanted to keep this simple and easy to understand. So, is there any other hint that this is not a coincidence and that I'm interpreting this right? Look, kitty corner. My parents were sealed on a 27/1973 pattern. Kitty corner. No, that's not coincidence.